Hi, everybody. I'm here with two Christian authors, and the Christian authors are Otangelo Grasso and Joe Marino, and they've authored some very interesting stuff on the Shroud of Turin. And so we're going to talk about the Shroud of Turin today. These two are what I would call experts on the Shroud of Turin, and you can see that if you read what they've written. Joe has pretty much seen every single thing that's out there on the Shroud of Turin. It's part of his life devotion. He's been really looking into it. And his stuff, I came upon his stuff at one point when I was researching it myself. I wanted to know, is the shroud the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ? And it didn't take long before I suddenly bumped into Joe's work and the reasons why we think it is the authentic burial cloth of Jesus Christ. And so today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how they think the image got there onto the shroud, and any other things that these two have picked up and would like to talk about. So without further ado, I think I had you on my channel just recently, Otangelo. So we'll start with Joe introducing himself, and then we'll go to Otangelo.
Hi. I've been researching the Shroud for 47 years now, and it started out as a hobby and has turned into a life's work. I kind of was a generalist. I guess I still am to some degree, but I've done some specific research in the area of the problems with the 1988 C14 dating on the Shroud. And I first wrote a three-part, I think it was like 75-page article back in 2016 on the problems that I discovered. And then later I expanded that into what turned out to be a 800-page book that was published in 2020. It's called the 1988 C14 Dating of the Shroud of Turin, a Stunning Expose, and that's available on Amazon. And I just like to keep up to the minute. I have a weekly email list to which I send people interested in the Shroud the latest news, books, articles, videos, podcasts. So anybody that wants to be on the list, they could email me at jmarino240@aol.com. Everyone on the list is blind copied, so your email is not seen by anybody. And anyone can request at any time to be removed from the list. It's been really busy with this, having been finished with Holy Week, and this is Easter week. And I've come up between the 2 weeks. I guess I'm over 65 items, a lot of them videos that have popped up on YouTube and whatnot. But there's always something going on, new papers, new books, conferences, articles and books that might not be totally on the Shroud, but have significant portions. So I always note those as well. So yeah, the Shroud's exciting. I'm super glad that I'm retired. I've been retired since 2018. So I love being able to work almost full time on the Shroud. It's an exciting topic. When I used to lecture in the St. Louis area when I was there, people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, I'd like to learn more about this," and I'd say, "Be careful. If you get in this, you may never get out," because I've only been aware of a couple people over 47 years that were, fairly heavily into it and were able to extricate themselves from it. But it's a fascinating subject. I always like my favorite line in a fiction novel. Kind of always caught my eye, and one of my favorite lines, a character says, "I don't know why everyone in the world isn't obsessed with the Shroud of Turin." That resonates with me because I do so much study and research on it. But I would encourage you to do some of your own research. There a ton of it out there, ranging from material for the novice to the PhD person. Best place to go if you want more information is www.shroud.com. That's Barry Schwartz's website. He always says if you plan to go there, pack a lunch and a snack and be prepared to spend some time. But anyway, that gives you a little background on me and my research.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so we'll go to Otangelo. He's probably going to mention he has a new website on the Shroud as well. So let's talk about that.
Well, no, I've put actually the link to my virtual library here, and I run that for more than 10 years. And there I have collected a ton of information about the Shroud. So anyone interested can go there and read about what I have collected so far in regards of the Shroud. So I know the Shroud since 1985, but I've been more closely involved in researching and learn about it maybe for 2 years or so. And I have written 2 books on the subject. They are also available on Amazon. And I'd say that I am, as much as Joe, fascinated, and I fully agree that once you start actually to dive into the science, the history, and so forth, it is very capturing. And it is also interesting that isn't just about one faculty, but it goes into history, into chemistry, into physics, and into theology, into philosophy, so many different areas of research. And I think this is precisely what keeps the Shroud investigation in general so much alive, and why so much material every week comes out about it, because it is a multifaceted subject which resonates with people of a very different area. And I'd say that I am more kind of interested in everything what is relevant to the Shroud. And I mean, I am, as a professional, machine designer. Since as a kid, I always loved to design. And one of my focus has been to attempt to get an image which would come closer to how Jesus looked like in real life. And I investigated this and spent some considerable time in trying to develop this image. And it took me about a year and 3 months or so to come to the current result that I have, which I think it comes pretty close to the real appearance. Of course, we do have an image with closed eyes. We have a black and white image on the Shroud. So there is some room of possible divergences in regards of creating such an image. We don't know how he looked like with open eyes. We don't know what the hair color and eye color was. So that leaves a room for interpretation. But I think that the current AI technology that we have available, the computer power, has permitted us to come very close and have a good grasp of how Jesus looked like. And this morning I had an interesting live stream in Italian with Fabio Quadrini and Barbara Facchini. And Barbara, she is an author of a science paper on the flagellation. And after we finished our conversation live, then we had a further chat in private. And she said, well, my dream would be to see a movie made by AI where we can have a really grasp how Jesus looked like and interacted with people and everything. I said, well, that is my dream too, because I think every Jesus movie that has been done so far has relevant discrepancies and errors in regards of how the crucifixion happened. Mostly he carries an entire crucifix, not only the patibulum, and these details. So also Mel Gibson's movie The Passion of Christ has several errors in regards of details and so forth, also the flagellation. So I think we will come very close very soon to a point where we can use the modern computer AI technology to make a movie where we can portray the occurrences written in the Gospels with a lot more accuracy than has been done in the past.
Yeah, no, that's really an interesting thought, and it's definitely, I love the fact that both of you are so passionate about all of this stuff. So we've talked in prior meetings, we've talked about the history of the shroud, we've talked about the doubts that have been cast on the 1988 dating. We've talked about some of the contents of the shroud, like the pollen, and I think we've talked about the coins over the eyes that were from the time of King Herod. And so there's a lot of stuff we've mentioned in the past. But I was thinking today it might be interesting just to discuss the image. And Nathaniel Robinson's in the chat here, and he's wondering about like the shadows in the image. I'm not exactly sure what he wants on that thing. And but it's like you said, black and white image. Why do you think the image landed there like it did, like in the shades and things that you saw, either of you?
Go ahead, Otangelo.
Well, I would say that the position, how the shroud was laid on the body, and then the moment of the production of that image, it is still very much shrouded in mystery. I have discussed this with Joe in private as well, and asked him some questions how he thinks that the shroud was laid on his body. I've talked in regards of this to Father Andrew Dalton to try to get them clarity on how the shroud, the linen, was laid on the body in order to have such a well-proportionate image. And I think that science doesn't have actually still a concise and clear answer to that. So it is a hypothesis that maybe at the moment of the resurrection, that the linen cloth was laid differently so that the image could be formed. We don't know that. I think Giulio Fanti has also written a very in-depth science paper on how he thinks that the radiation was transmitted to the shroud, a very good paper too. But in the end, we don't have actually really a full understanding how that was done, and we don't know if one day we will understand fully that image formation.
Yeah, early on, the scientists thought that it might have been, and I think it's still fairly prevalent today, that there was some sort of vertical collimation. I think the late John Heller said something to the effect of it was like 10,000 lasers emitted, at the same time from every pore of the body, and so the radiation or whatever form of energy was there sort of went, up from the front of the body and straight down from the back of the body, and there's no
You're going out a little bit. I think is maybe
there's no outline on the image. Usually
Joe.
An artist will start with an outline. Too much of the side images, that might be another explanation. So people, I read everything that people come up with their hypotheses. I usually don't go beyond saying I think it was some sort of, and possibly more than one type of radiation, because some people think there's X-ray information, some people think there's holographic information. The most I'm willing to say is that I think it was a short-term burst of radiation or energy that was short enough to impress an image onto the cloth such that it's only on the top 1 to 2 microfibrils. And even if, I don't have a problem to say if it was a nuclear reaction, that it was a controlled reaction. Some people say, oh, if it was a nuclear reaction, it would have blown up the cloth and blown up all of Jerusalem. my response to that is, well, if God wants to do a controlled nuclear radiation, he's quite capable of that. So yeah, so I limit myself to saying I think the image was a short-term burst of radiation and is connected with what we call the resurrection. But of course, we can't go into a laboratory and duplicate a resurrection. So science can really only go so far. And it really, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't try to investigate it, but science has its limits. And at some point, I think faith comes into it. But that's one of the it's debatable, and that's why the resurrection has been debated for 2,000 years, and the shroud has been debated for as long as it's been around, and it'll continue to do so. So, we kind of have to be prepared for not getting all the answers, but we want to, there's no danger of stopping because, people aren't going to say, oh, we'll never get this, let's give up. I mean, human beings don't do that. They will continue to research, and even though they might not get all the answers that they want.
Yeah, I just wanted to also and I think that I kind of think there could be something similar, kind of just like what you mentioned with this nuclear sort of thing, or like the atomic bomb, what it did over in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. If you see the image I have up on the screen, those are people, and somehow their images were sort of right in that moment burned into the ground. And so, and I don't know what happened to those people. I don't know if they've just disintegrated or what happened, but that was something that I think is maybe a little bit comparable and maybe gives us a hint to some sort of radiation.
They certainly would have disintegrated, and I would feel safe in saying that those are the images that we see there are negative, just like we see a negative image on the shroud.
Oh, that's interesting. So was the picture, I guess it was a picture, they would take it and they could reverse it somehow. Have you guys seen any experiments where they've tried to imitate the shroud and they failed?
Well, I would say kind of categorically, all the attempts to duplicate the shroud have been a failure in some way. People might have duplicated a few characteristics, but no one has duplicated every single feature. And what's interesting is that, I mean, some of them even there's been a few decent images that visually look okay, but they use the shroud itself as their model. What did the original artist use? But nobody has been able to do it such that the physics and the chemistry match. If they get the physics right, the chemistry is wrong. If they get the chemistry wrong, the physics are wrong. So nobody has duplicated the image fully, and even though some people claim they have, they simply have not duplicated every single image on the shroud to this point, and I doubt if they ever will.
It's one of those things where you show people so much evidence for the shroud. We mentioned a little bit, but there's also the blood evidence, the matching of the whole story with the crucifixion. There's the art evidence, like what you're kind of alluding to a little bit, is the ancient art. Otangelo talked a lot about this before, but the ancient art and how it looks very similar to the shroud. So it's like people must have seen the shroud when they created their pictures of Jesus. And so there's all these pieces of evidence. And so I find it very compelling. And to be a Christian and believe in the shroud is just a bonus. You don't need to believe in the shroud, but it's certainly a bonus if you realize that it's pretty cool. And I don't think there's a compelling case against it. So I used to think the carbon dating was compelling, but as I mentioned before we got on the call, I've been looking at recent studies. I found this 2020 study that really it talked about how incredibly heterogeneous the pieces were that they used to test that. And so there's just a lot of reasons to deny or to doubt that 1988 dating and to go back and take a look at all of the other stuff. And it's like a cumulative case, but you'll always get those deniers. There's always these people that no matter how much evidence you provide them, same with the resurrection, they're going to say, no, can't be.
Yeah, what I think is interesting, for example, the conversation that I had this morning with Fabio and Barbara Facchini. She's an atheist, and she has written a very in-depth paper in regards of the flagellation, and she said, I am 100% convinced that the man on the shroud is Jesus. And after when we finished the public live stream, I investigated her position, and she said, well, I would love so much that we could 100% prove that everything on the shroud is true, because I am still not 100% convinced. I believe it is Jesus. We have so much evidence for this and so forth, but I'm unable to move from being an atheist to become a believer. And for me, this was kind of very interesting. And there are other cases, like, for example, there are intelligent design proponents like Berlinski, and he's also an atheist. So what I want to say with this is this, that I would say 99% of atheists, they reject the shroud, they believe it is a forgery and so forth. But even if someone comes to be convinced that it is actually the authentic burial cloth of Jesus and that there happened a miracle or something like that, it is still not a warrant that that person then makes the transition from an atheist or an unbeliever to become a follower of Christ. Mm-hmm. So more than just evidence is necessary for that. And I've seen that so many times, and I think that in the end, it is really the Holy Spirit that has to draw someone to the Father. So, I mean, we can bring a horse to the spring to drink, but then the horse itself has to drink. So we can present all the evidence, but that isn't sufficient for someone really to make the change from an unbeliever to become a believer.
Yeah. And Susan just pointing out something here. The history of Sudarium of Oviedo, the face that appears in ancient icons, the ratio of the facial features with icons and the shroud and very old paintings is amazing. You looked at a lot of that in your book. Yes.
I've studied this in depth. I'm sure Joe did so too. So there are many things which just, I always say that in my view, Joe's finding of the fixing the corner that they tested, that is very strong evidence that the radiocarbon dating is flawed. But the other very strong evidence is, in my view, precisely the Sudarium of Oviedo, because we know that it covered the same individual. And the Sudarium has a historical track record which is acknowledged and known to the 7th, 6th century. So we know just from that the shroud is much older than from the 14th century. So this is further strong evidence, and they complement each other, and it is mentioned in the Gospels. It has the same blood type, it has lung edema on it. It has pollen particles, which also are from the same region, and many other details, which just converge all together to the same picture. So it is very powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to show you guys, just for people to see this, I'm going to show you an image of a, hold on, let me just find this image here, the Shroud book. There it is, Dating the Shroud. Okay, so this is just something that's 2020 from, and you guys might know these authors, Paolo Di Lazzaro and other authors, and they said a statistical and proactive analysis on an interlaboratory comparison, the radiocarbon dating of the Shroud of Turin. And so that's something that you can see right there. It said, we review the sampling and results of the radiocarbon dating of the archaeological cloth known as the Shroud of Turin in the light of recent statistical analyses of both published and raw data. The statistical analyses highlight an interlaboratory heterogeneity of the means and a monotone spatial variation of the ages of subsamples that suggest the presence of contaminants unevenly removed by the cleaning pretreatments. We consider the significance and overall impact of the statistical analysis on assessing the reliability of the dating results and the design of correct sampling. These analyses suggest that the 1988 radiocarbon dating does not match the current accuracy requirements. So let's just let you know, that's the current research. That's 2020. So those of you who are still harking on about 1988, just know that these are what scholars are saying today.
Yeah, and I think that the evidence in favor of the authenticity is summing up. Very recently, Joe has published, actually just reposted scientific research from Meacham, that the tissue of the shroud is most probably from the Palestine region. I've not read the paper. Maybe, Joe, you have more details on this, but I think it is very interesting that the more things are being investigated and coming up, the more it corroborates that the shroud is from 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I think the headline that they came up with was a little stronger than what Meacham actually said in the text. He did a press release, and he was a little less forceful in the headline, and then he sent it to an Italian researcher's site. Forget who that is at the moment, and he made the headline a little stronger. But even Meacham says in there that further research is needed. So there was an overlap between some of the samples between Israel and Europe, and I've seen some comments on sites, private sites and whatnot, that say it could just as easily have been in Europe as in Israel. So I'm waiting for it. It seems to be, compatible with a lot of the other research that leans toward it being Middle East, but I wouldn't say that this definitely pushes it over the line necessarily. But I sure hope this. I doubt if this Pope will allow any, research on the shroud. Perhaps the next Pope or one after that will allow some. I mean, the science and technology has advanced so much since 1978. They could solve many mysteries that we're still wondering about with new research. But Pope Francis has said, there's not going to be any new research while he's Pope. But we can, it's amazing to me how much research comes out with, the few samples that are still out there and whatnot, and different theories. Can you imagine how much more research, how much more material there'd be if new testing was allowed? My goodness, it would just be voluminous. But I think we have to wait and see some further research.
But I also think that it wouldn't be necessary to destroy some part, taking off samples and doing another radiocarbon test. There are so many tests that could be performed which
Sure.
wouldn't be non-invasive and not destroy the cloth whatsoever, and permit a lot of new insights into this relic. So
yeah,
So
in fact, a lot of the material that they took in the 2002 restoration has been sitting in vials since 2002, and they could do research on that. We wouldn't even have to
Joe, you're going out.
New material from the shroud, but
Joe, you're going in and out in the.
Joe, maybe you should get out and then rejoin the stream to reestablish the connection.
Your connection's kind of going. I don't think he can hear. Oh, now you look like you're back. You froze up.
He's frozen again.
Looks like yeah, you both were frozen for some seconds.
So
yeah, Yeah.
So they have 2002. So actually, I want to get this question in before I. So it says, because I don't actually know the answer to this. Have the blood samples been DNA tested? What is their heritage of the samples? Does it perfectly match other Eucharistic miracles? That's an interesting question.
Some DNA testing had been done in 1995. I think it was from a blood sample near the feet, if I'm not mistaken. They did say they usually hear that it's AB, and all the Eucharistic miracles are AB. But Kelly Kurse is the current blood expert. He's agnostic in terms of authenticity. But you know, it used to be said that all AB blood, all old blood, excuse me, types is AB eventually. And I've read on some of the Eucharistic miracles that I think Kelly believes that some of the science has not been very rigorous with that. So again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but this is another area where further research is going to be needed before we can come down more firmly on a match between the Eucharistic miracles and the shroud, and with the blood, with the advanced technology and science that we have on blood, that has advanced. So again, further new testing would be very helpful in that area.
Yeah, I definitely think that. So let me just see. It says Kevin I want to say hi to everybody who's in the chat while I can. I've seen Nathaniel Robinson. He's got his question answered here. Slam RN, that's Susan. Very good to see you. Kevin traditional Catholic. So I was on Kevin's channel once. He was a traditional Catholic. Now he's a non-traditional Catholic. So who else we have here? Diagoras of Melos is in here. So we've got a little mixture of a couple of people who are very probably skeptical towards the shroud, and then the believers. Oh, and I saw Shiami too. So say hi to Shiami. Hi to Chris Peacock. Good to see everybody.
Yeah, I will have a debate with a German atheist next month. And we had in private quite some exchange on evidence and so forth. And then after I presented him all the evidence at hand, he changed his position. And rather than saying, oh, it's a forgery from the Middle Ages, he changed to say, no, that's not Jesus. It is the Gospels are written between 70 and 90 AD. That means that probably the entire Gospels, they were forged. And at the same time period, they just took a crucified guy and laid him in a shroud and then forged that in order to have empirical evidence of the stories which were invented. And I mean, I've never heard such kind of, let's say, attempt of escape. But
that's a stretch. It's a stretch.
Yeah, but anyway, I accepted to have a public debate with him, and I think he will have a hard time to sustain and corroborate that hypothesis.
I want to say hi real quick to Spooky Bed here, who says, I'm here for my shout out. So make sure. Okay, there's a question here from Diagoras. It says, when did you guys acquire a sample of Jesus's blood to verify the blood found on the shroud? And so all I can say is I believe that AB is more common among people from the Levant. I've been told that. But no, I don't think we have Jesus's, unless I would say that the blood on the shroud is Jesus's blood, with all the evidence pointing to Jesus being the person who was crucified, the crown on the head, the crown of thorns, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, some of the sticky tape samples that the START members brought back and were able to keep per their agreement in 1978 had blood samples on it. And people also often ask about the DNA related to that. And for one thing, we don't have, DNA is going to be degraded and then we don't have Jesus's original DNA to compare this with. So DNA is kind of like a dead end, really, in a way. And for those that wonder, no, there's not enough DNA on there to clone Jesus, despite the fact that there are about a dozen fiction novels that the plot is that Jesus is cloned from the Shroud. Makes for interesting reading, but it's still science fiction.
Oh my gosh, that is too funny. So yeah, that's so. What do you think that you guys, if you're in the audience and you have questions, we can answer the questions, and so we'll just try from there. But AB, I think. What do you think is the significance of it being AB itself instead of like? I think you just said something about this a second ago, Joe, that I didn't quite catch.
Yeah.
Like how one of them's universal recipient and one's universal donor, and I'm trying to remember which one's AB because I always get that mixed up.
I just saw a video by David Hines the other day. He's Good Shepherd Films. If you want to look him up on YouTube, his newest video, he said something to the effect that the blood of the man in the shroud can be universally given or universally received. That's the first time I heard that one. But again, oh yeah, the AB blood is rare among the most people in the world, but it's very prevalent in the Middle East. So if it is AB, that would fit well with Jesus being Middle Eastern. But there's still, as I said, there's questions about the AB type and that sort of thing.
It's funny. My mom was AB and my dad is O. So I'm AO. I'm A positive blood. I always remember because it's A plus. My husband's A plus. All my kids are A plus. We're all the same thing, but it's so yeah, that's where we're coming from. But my mom was that rare one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see here. So Nathaniel Robinson's kind of pushing back here a little bit. Says SJ isn't saying the DNA is degraded a form of heresy. The blood would be eternally divine and cannot degrade.
Well, Jesus was fully human, so I would expect his blood and DNA to act like any other human's DNA and blood.
I was thinking about this. Somebody said something once that I thought was really interesting. It's just when you think about the bloodline of Jesus and how they used to track everyone with King David, they were always tracking the heritage of people passed down. And so you would know exactly who the people were, your great-grandfathers, your great-great-grandfathers. People were doing very good jobs keeping track of ancestry. And then I thought of Jesus, and I thought, now I actually believe that the James, Jude, they name these so-called brothers of Jesus that I think are definitely blood relatives of Jesus. And I'm just thinking with like James and Jude and the other ones, the blood relatives of Jesus, it's I think some of them might have had kids. I mean, I'm wondering if anyone's tracked that or thought about that, if there's a trail of blood going, or if they just all were killed off.
I have heard of that. Some of Jesus's relatives were referred to. I can't remember the source, but I think they were known to, some of his relatives were known to have existed in the early centuries, second or third, I'm guessing. So yeah, I mean, there'd be no reason that they wouldn't have some sort of descendants from his ancestry, even if he didn't get married. He's got cousins and whatnot. So yeah, that's always been one of the biblical controversies. The Catholic tradition believes that the brothers of Jesus were either cousins or possibly Joseph's sons by a previous marriage, whereas the Protestants tend to think that they were actually blood brothers. But that's a separate issue.
Yeah, I want to say all these people just came in here from Sam Shamoon. So thank you, Sam, for sending everybody over here. So God is King says he's here, he or she is here because of Sam Shamoon. I'm just going to name people here real quick. Justin Henley. We've got in the chat too. We've got Samuel Payne, Angels Travels, Sponge Gaming, And so they're all here because Sam decided to send them over here. So thank you, Sam, wherever you are. I'd like to get Sam on my channel sometime too. Oh, Kanaj 561, Athir M. Boy, Sam gets a lot of people on his channel. He's got a very popular channel. Are you guys familiar with that channel?
I'm not.
Yes, he deals with Muslims.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he is a former Muslim, but he pretty much opposes the Islamic religion.
Yeah. So, well, I think it's interesting to talk about the shroud, the history of the shroud, the image on the shroud. What is out there still left that we could be looking at with the shroud that would be, we talked about DNA could be something that they look at further, taking samples and doing the radiocarbon dating again. But what else do you see that needs to be known about the shroud that we just don't know right now?
I'd say the sky's the limit. I know Barry Schwartz has told me that if STIRP was able to go back, they would actually like to redo some of the tests that they did in 1978, simply because the equipment is so much smaller and better than it was back then. STIRP had proposed in 1984 26 additional tests that they wanted to do, and that included the C14. Sorry.
Oh, I think.
And one of the amazing things is that I mentioned in my C14 book is that at the time in 1985, a year after STIRP proposed these new tests that they wanted to do, and even those are going to be old by today's standards. But Cardinal Ratzinger, Joseph Ratzinger, who later became Benedict XVI, actually approved STIRP to get 2 weeks with the shroud to do new testing. And some group or individual was somehow able to go over Cardinal Ratzinger's head and get those canceled.
When was
and
that,
that's part of the, that's
Joe?
one of the proposal was published in 84, and Cardinal Ratzinger approved it in July of 1985. And then they had a planning meeting. I'm sorry, I should have silenced my phone. Hold on.
Let me
go ahead.
And then you're saying another bishop or a cardinal was the one who made sure it didn't happen?
I don't know if it was a bishop or a cardinal or some group outside the church that exerted influence. I know Harry Gove was working closely with a couple people in the church, including Professor Chagas, who was the president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. I better not get started on that because I won't stop. But yeah, there was a lot of intrigue. They would have done another carbon-14 as part of the test, and the C14 people wanted to do only the C14, and they managed to get STIRP eliminated from any of the testing. And it was very poorly done, because in 1986, in September and October, they actually had a workshop in Turin to establish the protocol for the C14 dating, and they invited STIRP scientists and C14 scientists from all over the world to establish a protocol. And originally they were going to do 7 labs and take samples from 3 different spots on the cloth. And then when the sample was taken on April 21st, 1988, Rigi was an Italian scientist, and Professor Ganella, who was the Cardinal's scientific advisor, ended up arguing for about an hour and a half where the sample was going to be taken. It's like, you had a whole workshop in 1986.
Shoot, you're going out again, Joe. Joe, you're going out again. You can't. I don't know what's going on. I want to clarify for Susan. But you're going out, Joe.
They just
am I the only one?
The window, and they ended up taking, and you don't know if that's representative of the whole cloth. You can't possibly know that. I maintain that the C14 test was invalid simply because they only took one sample. And if it had come out first century and I knew that all the data that I know now how they did it, I wouldn't trust the C14 date for the first century, even if with that, and I feel like there's enough other evidence to support authenticity anyway, so it wouldn't bother me if the C14 was just thrown out. And I don't think C14 will ever be done again, because Giulio Fanti has come up with four different other methods, three or four, and there's four total, I think, if you count Ray Rogers' vanillin test. And some of those are non-destructive. So I really doubt that even when new testing is done, that they will actually, I don't think they'll do another C14. I think they'll do one or more of the new non-destructive dating tests.
Joe, what do you think about some people claiming that the Shroud went through a fire in 1532 or something like that? And they are claiming, based on this occurrence, that even if someone would take a part somewhere else of the cloth and making a test, it would be very likely that even if the shroud were 2,000 years old, the results would be altered based on its burning. What is your opinion on this?
Mm-hmm. From what I've read, opinion is kind of divided. I see people say, yeah, fire will affect the carbon-14. I see other experts saying, no, it wouldn't. With cleaning, it would not affect the carbon in the sample. So I kind of sit on the fence with that. I think it's possible that it could have affected the dating, but one of the proponents of that, I have to say, for people that might have heard the name of a Russian scientist named Dr. Dmitry Kuznetsov, he gave a paper in Rome in 1993, and it was all the rage for a while. But he was found to have made up references in his papers, and he's been really discredited. So I think the fire hypothesis took a blow after he made his appearance and departure. But I think it's possible. There's still a lot of other scientists that think that the fire definitely could have affected the carbon content.
So let me just go real quick. I'm going to say hi to all these people who've come in here from Sam Shamoon. People are talking about his religion. He was not a Muslim. He's, I believe, Eastern Orthodox, and somebody said he's Assyrian, leaning towards Eastern Catholic. So that's interesting. Hi, Captive Desk. Good to see you. Kevin Non-Traditional asked a couple questions about the Pope Francis, but then he had another question I wanted to put up here. But he just thinks that you think Pope Francis is not going to, while he's here, we won't be getting more on the shroud. But then he says, if Joe's main concern is that only one sample was taken, will Joel admit that that one sample is likely from the 13th or 14th century? That actually gets to how Joe sort of made a name for himself. Do you want to explain what happened with the sampling and your theory?
Mm-hmm. Well, my late wife, Sue Benford, was looking at that corner where they took the sample, and she thought she saw irregularities there. So I got out one of my better pictures of the shroud, and we actually took some photos of the Zurich sample and sent them blinded, meaning we didn't tell the textile experts that it was from the shroud, and we just asked them to give a basic analysis. And 3 independent textile experts, not knowing that it was the shroud, all said that they thought that it had been manipulated or repaired. So we did some further research, and we found out that there was a technique in the Middle Ages called French invisible reweaving. And the shroud at that time was owned by a member of the House of Savoy, a woman named Margaret of Austria. And she had the best weavers in Europe at the time, and they would have been capable of doing what we call an invisible reweave. And so Ray Rogers later found a cotton linen spice. He found gum and dye, which you would need to do a repair. And so if you have a combination of 1st century cloth with a 16th century repair, you can come out with a medieval date. So I have no problem. They may, with all the mess ups that the lab did, they may have actually still come out with a reasonable date for the sample that they were given. But that they said that it proved that it was medieval to a 95% degree, which I of course don't agree with, because they're thinking it's all medieval. But if it's a mixture, I'm perfectly happy to say, okay, yeah, what they dated was, but they happened to get it right despite all their errors, that it was a mixture and it came out medieval. But that doesn't prove that the shroud is medieval.
That helps to, like the study that I just showed everybody, that helps to explain why it says heterogeneity in the samples. There's so much difference. And I guess, do either of you know anything about what recently was done where they had to somehow get the original data from a couple of places, that they had to get a court order to get this data because they wanted to examine it from the 4 different locations?
Yeah, originally scientists, right after the dating, asked the British Museum for the raw data. That's normal in any scientific experiment, because other scientists wanted to look at the data and be able to reproduce it. That's a hallmark of scientific experimentation, is reproducibility. And the British Museum refused. I did hear one skeptic say that he went to the British Museum and was given access to the material, and he said nobody previously asked. Well, I've read multiple times in the literature that the British Museum was asked multiple times for the data and wouldn't give it. And so a French researcher did a Freedom of Information Act in 2017 and did get 750 pages of material. And then he and several Italian researchers, including several statisticians, and I believe that included possibly Riani of the one that you posted before. I think he might have been on that article as well.
He was.
Okay. Yeah. And they basically said that the labs it was not appropriate for them to attribute it a 95% accuracy based on what they did, because I think they actually dated like 8 samples, but they only reported having dated 4, and they kind of combined the data in a way that statistically they could claim that 95%. But once the raw data was out, statisticians kind of had a field day and say, oh, you didn't, this is not correct, this is not correct. So you can't, based on the data that we now have that you refused to release for 27 years, it's not appropriate to say that this proves that the shroud was medieval.
Good. Yeah, that's interesting. And so Susan says, didn't Scientific American magazine already know the results of the so-called dating before it was announced?
I think she means Nature. It was the report was in Nature magazine. The editor of Nature at the time was militantly anti-Christian, and I've got an interesting article. If people want to, I guess I can put, if I can remember my academia page. I have an article called "Dishonesty in Science: Did It Occur with the Turin Shroud?" I think it's called. There's a lot of material about the editor of Nature at the time, and it's pretty telling, some of his actions. And I had a couple other researchers contribute to my article as well. So I'm going to put my I hope
You have to get that door. Is that your house?
Remember it. It's I'm just gonna let it go. Everybody's calling and ringing when I'm on these, and I don't get those calls or doorbells hardly any other time. Academia.
Let me ask Otangelo while you're looking that up. Otangelo, there's a few questions coming in for you. You put in there about the Hungarian Prey Codex, and then it says, why didn't it be super high zap that caused the image fry the blood and make it untestable? I'm not sure exactly what he means really. But then Kevin also says, how many pictures of the shroud complete with the image of Jesus are found in the Prey Codex?
Well, it's not necessary to have the entire image. What we have is sufficient enough to identify that those painters who made the image in the Prey Codex, they did looking at the shroud. So that's an objection which I don't think is sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like what you've done in your book when you compared the images to each other and just with the shroud and how it all kind of aligns. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's not only the Prey Codex. We have the Pantocrator painting from the 6th century. And in my book, I've made that superimposing of the man on the shroud with the image on the Pantocrator. And you see very clearly that the convergence of the two images, also the face is not the same on the right and the left side, precisely as we see it on the shroud. So that is very strong evidence. And also the solidus coins from the Byzantine Empire. There are some versions where you clearly see the cheekbone which was hurt. Then there are other very clear details where we can say it is quite certain that these coins, the images are based on the image on the shroud. So, and this spans over several centuries before the 13th and 14th century. We are talking here about solidus coins 8th century and the Pantocrator 6th century. And we have images from the Roman Empire where you see Christ with the bifurcated beard. There is a very clear image in near Rome, and we can suppose that probably the shroud image was known also even before the 6th century by some people. So we have a rich history, which it is simply not true that we have only information of the shroud after the 14th century. There's a lot of information prior to that.
Yeah. And you actually had in your book, and I don't know if people know about this, but you went to a catacomb, and in the 1st century, there was a painting of Jesus in the catacomb. And so I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that because people haven't maybe heard that.
Well, I would say that the image, it is dated to the 1st century, the section of the catacomb where there is this image, but I think it is too much deteriorated to say with certainty that it portrays Jesus, and so I would not necessarily take this as evidence.
Yeah. People are talking about Pope Francis. I want to say the one thing about the Catholic Church is it's extremely conservative with respect to any sort of miracles or any relics or icons or anything like that. And it does that because it doesn't want to be wrong. And so like for Lourdes, when thousands of people have claimed miracles at the site of Lourdes, they've only formally approved 70 of them. And it's after they go through an extensively rigorous process before approving those miracles. And so I think that that's probably the same attitude they have with the shroud until they feel like 100% or maybe 120% certain that the shroud is true. They're not going to, they'll just be like, okay, we're not, sure, the testing is 88, whatever. So I don't think the Catholic Church has gone out of its way to do anything with respect to proving the shroud, and I don't think it ever will. So thank you, Joe. You're back. Lost you for a moment there. So is there anything else we should talk about before we, I know we've gone on an hour now, but we could.
As a matter of course,
we're losing you still. Oh. I think he's frozen up again. Can you still hear me, Otangelo?
Well, maybe I can. Maybe I can respond to Kevin.
Not a fake. I'm sorry, Otangelo.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can respond to Kevin in the side chat. He says that the Pray Codex is the best example and contains no images of the shroud. Well, I strongly disagree with that. We have, for example, the 4 burning holes in the image on the Pray Codex, which portrays precisely the same burning holes which we can see on the shroud. And also the herringbone structure of the tissue on the shroud is clearly drawn on the Pray Codex. So I think that the artist which made these images, he had the shroud as example, as template. So I disagree with that claim. Maybe you want to add something on this, Joe.
Joe, let me say, I've got Captive Death saying to turn your camera off because maybe that's taking up too much bandwidth.
In the chat.
Yeah, because you keep going in and out.
I wonder if I'm going to probably need to upgrade my my internet service. So could you repeat, Otangelo, what you just mentioned?
Yeah, so we have the Pray Codex, which is an old manuscript from Hungary. And Kevin in the side chat, he claims that the images contained in the Pray Codex, they are not parallel or do not portray the same burning holes as we see them on the shroud. So I think that the shroud went through an event where these burning holes occurred probably during the time that it was in Constantinople. And then who saw the shroud and made the image in the Pray Codex just reproduced the same burning holes that we see on the shroud. And also the structure of the herringbone of the tissue is portrayed on the Pray Codex. So this is for me very clear evidence and parallels the shroud. So I don't agree with that. It's not the same.
Yeah, I would agree. There seems to be the herringbone. It's got the hands crossed like it does on a shroud. It's got the 4 fingers, no thumbs. There's quite a few articles. I have on my academia page. I have a whole article with even bibliography and commentary on the number of similarities. So yeah, and especially one of I think the strongest points is the L-shaped burn holes. The shroud has 4 L-shaped burn holes, and you find that on the Pray Codex. And so for an artist, why would an artist doing the Pray Codex put those on there unless he had seen it on the shroud and maybe he still didn't know what it was, but he says, well, he might have thought, well, it's on the shroud, so I'll just repeat it on my illustration.
Yeah, and Kevin is claiming here that, well, the fire was from the 16th century. Yes, we know of the fire from the 16th century, but it is very probable that the shroud went through 2 events of being burnt, not only one. Maybe you have more details on this. I hear that they had some processions in Constantinople in the church, where they weekly they showed the shroud, the crowd, and it is very probable that during this period it went through some burning. Maybe you have more details on this, Joe.
Well, the Prayer Codex was done between 1192 and 1195, and we know that the shroud was in Constantinople from at least 944 to 1204, and there was some connection between I think the King of Hungary and somebody involved with or somebody in Constantinople. So there was a chance that the artist might have come to Constantinople and seen it. I don't remember anything specifically off the top of my head in terms of processions, but I think there's a lot of strong evidence that whoever did the Prayer Codex did in fact see the shroud firsthand.
Yeah, what I read is that when they did some processions, they used some, I don't know in English the word, some container that they then had some smoke, some kind of perfume, some smoke, something like that, and that eventually the burning coal then fell some parts on the shroud eventually, and then got these burning holes, something like that.
Incense, coals in the incense like that they still use in the Catholic Church, other churches as well. Yeah.
There's a question here about shoulder length hair. I just wanted to get that because the shroud does indicate that Jesus's hair is a little bit longer. It's not short like both of your hair. And so did you want to comment on, is there evidence of the early religious leaders having hair like that?
Well, Jesus would have adhered to the laws of Moses, and the law of Moses was, if you look in the Old Testament, lots of Jews had long hair, Samson and other people. So yeah, Jews had long hair. Now, people often bring up Paul's admonition about long hair is abomination or whatever for men, but he was talking to a Roman colony in Corinth 20 years after the resurrection. That didn't apply to Jesus. So basically Jews in the Old Testament had long hair. Jesus probably had long hair. The shroud shows a man with long hair. So long hair is not an issue at all.
Yeah, I think it's longer hair. I mean, we have just all the nice kind of stuff we have to cut people's hair today, and all of the higher technology. I wouldn't expect they're going to all these places. I don't expect it was quite the way it is here with our expectations on what you can do with the modern scissors we have, and razors. So is there? So what else should we? I guess we probably maybe go another 5-10 minutes. Is it anything else that we should chat about? You guys see anything? They're talking about a link to the Prayer Codex in the picture. Oh, you got a link to that? Let me see if we can get that. Okay, so Joe says, find dishonesty in science. Has it occurred in the Shroud of Turin? So he's got an article on his website where you can see that. I would actually find that a very fascinating article on dishonesty in science, because I mean, I know people publish what they want to publish. A lot of times if the results turn out that you guess something was going to happen, the results turn out the opposite, maybe not the way you want it to. Some people will shove that thing into a desk drawer and never publish it because they don't like the results. I know that happens.
So maybe we can show the image on the Prayer Codex. I have it here.
Yeah.
And let me just pull it up here so we can discuss what we are show what we are talking about.
Yeah, just waiting for. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So.
You guys might want to make your screens bigger to see this.
Yeah, there is the other picture where we can see the burning holes. Let me check if I find it. Here. Okay. So that shows clearly the burning holes on the shroud, and the same pictured in the pre-codex. So I think it would be really very much coincidence if the artist didn't have in mind to portray precisely these burning holes, I would say.
Yeah, it gives a solid. I mean, a lot of that ancient art is very telling.
Otangelo, could you go back to that picture of when the Mandylion or the shroud is arrived in Constantinople and was presented to the emperor in 944?
Yes. Yes.
I want to make a comment about that because I think that's really
Here.
interesting. Yeah.
This one.
Look,
Okay.
you can see a long cloth being presented to the emperor when it arrived Constantinople 944, but look at, you can see a head. It's a long cloth, and that there's a head on top of the long cloth. Now that can't represent an actual human on a cloth because that's the anatomy's wrong. But if you think about it in terms of a shroud with an image on it, that may be one way of an artist is trying to say that there was an image on a long cloth. So I thought that was interesting.
Let me maybe show the renderings which I made to show the comparison between here.
Doesn't make sense otherwise.
The Solidus coin and the image on the shroud. So what is interesting here that you can see the face on the left side is thinner than on the right side, and that's both on the shroud cloth and also on the Solidus coin. And in the middle of the image, you see here the image, the real image, and on the right side, you see the right left cut and then joined together, and you see both on the shroud and on the Solidus coin how that side is larger, and on the left side it's the opposite. It is thinner, and that's also both on the shroud and on the Solidus coin. So that is for me very clear evidence that the artist which made the coin had the shroud as template.
Yeah, I think that the fascinating thing for me is the beard and how it goes back to the book of Isaiah where they were pulling at his beard and it basically said that's what they were going to do. And so you see like the fork there.
Exactly, yes. And I've done the same in regards of the Pantocrator image here. Let me show you that here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. I want to say hi to people in the chat. So Kevin, non-traditional Catholic, Hugh Ferry, Chris Peacock. Let me just get to some more here. I want to make sure people like to get shout outs when we. Susan Slam RN, Vargas Matthew. Who else we have here? Nathaniel Robinson, Jedediah Ramale, and who else? Captive Desk. So Hugh Ferry. Got a lot of good people here in the chat. I hope I didn't miss. Oh, Diagras of Malos. So you guys are still hanging out with us. So thank you for hanging in here so long. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think that the Pantocrator image is very powerful to show that the artist most likely used the shroud image as a template. Very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the bottom line for you guys is you don't need to believe in the shroud to be a Christian. You don't have to believe in the shroud if you're a Christian, but it's certainly a great, if you look into it in an honest way with an open mind, look into the ancient art, the pollen, the other evidence coming right from limestone in Jerusalem, the matchups in history and how it traveled around. You look at the coins. I think the coins were quite compelling. And I think if you just look at the science that's out there right now, there's so much giving us evidence for Jesus Christ being the man who was in the shroud. And I think the bigger picture on this whole thing is how much love he had for us and the hell he went through that day. Like, he went through pure hell that day and the night before, being spat on, whipped, beaten. They've got evidence. He's got not just a crown of thorns, like a little halo. Instead, it's like a cap of thorns over his head. They were mocking him. They were doing everything, punching him in the face. He was barely recognizable, according to the book of Isaiah in 52. And so you just see all that kind of stuff, and you realize he did that for everyone in here, including those of you who are non-believers in him. And he did that if there were just one of us. He would have done the same thing. That's how much love he has.
Yeah, and this morning in the stream where we were talking about the flagellation, I had a kind of doubt if Jesus got 39 strikes, which was the Jewish law, or 120, which is what Giulio Ricci and others claim to be. And Barbara Faccini, she counted 370 marks from the flagellation, while Giulio Ricci over 700. So I asked her what she thinks, if he got 39 or 120. And she said, well, I am convinced it was much more than just 39. And she says that probably Pilate, he didn't want to crucify Jesus. He just wanted that he would get a punishment and then let him go. And if the intent was since the beginning to crucify him, he wouldn't have been flagellated so severely. And maybe he would have gotten 10 or 15 strikes and then let him go to the crucifixion. But he had the intent to just give him this punishment and then let him go. So he suffered much more than just usual crucifixion candidates. So what he went through was true hell. And if we also see the feet, which has impressed me a lot, that you see that there were 2 nails and one went through his one of the 2 feet, and that was just horrible. So he must have suffered something that we cannot even imagine.
Yeah. So let's maybe close this out, but I want to find out what you guys are working on now, where we can find you, anything you want to share.
I'm going to be working on another article soon. Let's see if I can. My short-term memory is not what it used to be. I got a title, but it's not coming to me at the moment. I'm just writing notes for it right now. And of course, it'll be on Academia, where I post most of my articles. I'm also helping to organize a conference for St. Louis, Missouri, next late July, early August 2025. It'll be an international conference, and we hope it'll be the first one in North America since 2019. So we hope to see a lot of our United States friends and some of our foreign friends as well. And then I'm also keeping busy with my weekly Shroud posting with the latest articles and videos and stuff. I hope to put another one out tonight. Holy Week and Easter are kind of like the 2 busiest weeks of the year, and the Easter this week's ones was so big I have to divide it up into about 3 different postings instead of otherwise there'd probably be close to 80 or 90 on one posting, which is a bit much. So yeah, Shroud keeps me busy all the time. And I'm helping our I'm on a group with Otangelo, who's started a group to try to disseminate accurate information about the Shroud all over the world, and he's doing a great job with that. So he can say more about that right now.
Yeah, so I started this group and invited Joe to be with me right from the beginning, because he has much broader network of Shroud scholars, and we had already 2 Zoom meetings where we discussed how we can disseminate knowledge of the Shroud in regions in the world where people have not heard about it. And it has been good so far. I've been able to invite people from Pakistan, from Nepal, from India, from Kenya. They have participated in the second Zoom meeting, and some have already started to disseminate this information in their respective countries. And my next intent is to organize in India with a pastor a seminar where he can invite local pastors and evangelists to listen to some renowned scholar and learn about the Shroud through Zoom. So this will be one of the topics that we will discuss in our next Zoom meeting, to organize that, seeing who would like to speak about that. And yes, and I started a Gmail group where we can share information about the Shroud, and maybe SJ, you can put the link in this episode here. So anyone interested to go deeper to understand more about the Shroud is welcome. Now, what we have decided, we don't the list and the Gmail group is not intended as a debate of the authenticity of the Shroud. It is intended for people to participate which already believe that the Shroud is authentic, and discuss how we can disseminate the knowledge of the Shroud. So that is the intent. So anyone which is a believer that the Shroud is authentic and wants to contribute somehow to disseminate that knowledge is welcome to participate both in the Zoom meetings as well as in the list.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so you guys want to make sure to go to their websites, go to also jmarino40@aol.com. Make sure you do that too.
J Marino 240.
Oh, 240. Okay, I need my glasses. So yeah, make sure that you do that, and so make sure you guys follow all that kind of good information. These guys are devoting a lot of time and resources to this stuff, so it's good that you can learn a lot in a little while because they put it all together for us. So thank you for all you do, both of you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you, SJ, for the opportunity to be at your channel. It has been great, the episode that we had, giving skeptics, non-believers, and believers alike the opportunity to learn more about the Shroud. I hope that we can continue doing it in some intervals, and also see the rest of the infographics and go into detail on that.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm going to mention, I'm trying to do, just so you guys know, I'm trying to do regular shows on Wednesdays, always at 4:30. If I'm going to be out of town, like I'm going to be next week, I'm going to be in Chicago for a conference, then I can't do my show on Wednesday. So what I'm going to do is I'll pre-record something and put it down at that time slot. And I also am going to be doing shows at noon on Saturday. And so again, the same issue with the out of town stuff. If I'm not there to do my Saturday social or my Wednesday witness, then I will try to post something. So right now, if you go to Saturday, you're going to notice I just posted a response video on the book of Daniel to Myth Vision, Kip Davis, and Josh Bowen. And I have some really good information on the dating of Daniel in that. It's about a half-hour video. And so be sure to go watch that at noon on Saturday. So thank you, guys.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Thank you.
Amen.
Bye, everybody.